Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I continue bringing you the love story of James and Diep, a story that is simple at heart, yet always finds a way to touch emotions in the gentlest way. After Christmas, as the festive atmosphere slowly fades, winter remains, quietly wrapping everything in its chill. A cold winter, yet one made warm by human connection, by small, ordinary moments that only reveal their true value when we look back on them. The morning begins in the small house with the subtle chill of winter. It's not the kind of cold that makes you reluctant to leave the bed, but just enough to clearly feel the change in the season. In that quiet space, Diep wakes up early. She gently prepares breakfast, each familiar movement slow and careful, as if she doesn't want to disturb the rare sense of peace that a winter morning brings. As she works, Diep reminds little Nee to brush her teeth, wash her face, and put on an extra layer to avoid getting sick. Her voice isn't loud or hurried, just steady and gentle, like a routine repeated countless times. Nee listens obediently, following along while replying with short, clear responses. The simple kitchen gradually grows warmer from the smell of hot food, the light steam rising, and the familiar sounds of a family morning. Diep sets the breakfast on the table and waits for Nee to sit down and eat. She doesn't go to wake James right away, choosing instead to patiently wait until Nee finishes her meal. It's a very small habit, yet one filled with quiet care that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. Nee eats slowly, smiling the whole time because she has the day off from school. She keeps inviting Diep to eat with her, excitedly showing off the good child reward cards she has carefully saved. Once Nee finishes eating, Diep finally goes into the bedroom to wake James. She calls him in her familiar voice, not rushed, not too loud. James gets up, washes his face and hands, then steps outside. The morning cold sharpens his senses, but when he sits down at the table with the two of them, the atmosphere immediately feels much more comforting. The three of them sit together around the small table. Breakfast is simple, just bread and instant noodles, familiar and unremarkable dishes. Yet in the winter weather, those hot meals bring an unexpected sense of warmth. Nee is especially cheerful today, constantly inviting James and Diep to eat, proudly showing her reward cards again and again. James watches Nee eat with such enthusiasm, his gaze softening with each small gesture she makes. Diep sits beside him, quietly observing, a gentle smile forming at the corner of her lips. There are no grand words, no dramatic actions, but it is precisely these simple moments that make a winter morning in their small home feel so much warmer. While they were eating, the conversation between Diep and James unfolded naturally, without any sense of awkwardness or prearrangement. Diep slowly shared her thoughts about wanting to visit a vegetable-growing area farther away, one she had heard was developing in a fairly sustainable direction. She didn't speak quickly, nor with excessive excitement, it was more as if she were thinking out loud, speaking while carefully weighing each idea. It wasn't merely a casual trip, but a hope to explore a new business direction, one better suited to their current situation and long-term future. James listened attentively. He didn't interrupt, nor did he rush to give his opinion right away. His gaze remained on Diep, occasionally nodding gently to show that he was genuinely engaged in what she was saying. When Diep finished, James began to analyze things calmly. He mentioned the advantages of fruit trading, a field they were already familiar with and had existing connections in, then compared it with vegetables, a newer direction that carried many opportunities if approached correctly. He also spoke honestly about potential risks, from transportation and storage costs to the uncertainty of market demand. The conversation remained light and unpressured. There was no heated debate, no urgency to make an immediate decision. It was simply two people sitting together, thinking about the future, each with their own perspective, yet guided by the same intention. Between them, there was no need for grand declarations, only respect in every sentence, and understanding shone through careful listening and thoughtful responses. Nee sat beside them, eating while catching fragments of the adults' conversation. She didn't fully understand it, but she could still feel the peaceful atmosphere surrounding the small dining table. At first, James had planned not to go along. His mind was still occupied with unfinished work, tasks that needed attention soon if he didn't want things to fall behind. He thought about schedules, pending responsibilities, and his long-standing habit of putting work first. That hesitation briefly showed on his face as he glanced at Diep, unable to give a definite answer just yet. Then Nee suddenly spoke up. She turned toward James, her eyes lighting up, her voice filled with sincere pleading. She talked about having a day off from school, about wanting to go with them, about wishing to spend a full day together. That hopeful look made James pause. He looked at Nee, at the way she set her spoon down and waited for his response, as if his answer in that moment mattered more than anything. Once a week, Nee only had one day off from school. The thought crossed James's mind quickly, but it was enough to slow him down. He realized that moments like these didn't come often. Work could be rearranged, made up later, but time spent with the people he loved could never be recovered if missed. His initial hesitation gradually faded, replaced by a clear sense of tenderness. James decided to rearrange his work and go along with the two of them. The decision didn't come from obligation or duty, but from a genuine desire to be by their side. He didn't say much, just nodded, but in his eyes was a quiet certainty and warmth. Diep looked at James, noticing the change. She said nothing more, only smiled softly. Nee, on the other hand, was openly delighted, her happiness showing in every small gesture, as if the entire morning had suddenly become much lighter. After preparing their warm coats, boots, and other necessary items, the three of them left the small house together. The winter morning was still slightly chilly, with a thin layer of mist gently covering the road ahead. James walked a little in front, Diep followed behind, and Nee moved along while looking around curiously, unable to hide her excitement. The trip wasn't very far, but it was enough to feel like they were stepping away from their familiar daily rhythm and entering a different space, slower and more open. As the vegetable growing area gradually came into view, the surroundings seemed to open up. Along the calm riverbank, rows of lush green vegetables stretched far into the distance. Cabbages were arranged in neat, rounded rows, their leaves tightly wrapped and glossy. Kohlrabi rose slightly above the soil, white cauliflower stood out against the green, and tomato plants were heavy with ripe fruit, splashes of red scattered across the fields in season. The scene was rustic yet full of life, completely different from what the three of them were used to seeing every day. James and Diep walked slowly, observing as they went, occasionally stopping beside a row of vegetables to take a closer look. They spoke softly, exchanging thoughts about the differences between soil conditions and farming methods. James pointed toward the plots closer to the river, talking about soil moisture and how people made use of natural water sources. Diep listened, then shared things she had heard or seen in other places. The conversation wasn't driven by calculations, but felt more like the two of them learning together, quietly taking in each small detail. Meanwhile, Nee could hardly stay still. She ran between the rows of vegetables, her small boots sinking lightly into the soft soil. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity as she bent down to touch cabbage leaves, then lifted her head to look at the bright red tomatoes. She kept calling out to James and Diep, eagerly showing them the things she discovered, her voice echoing through the wide space, clear and joyful. The atmosphere at that moment felt entirely different. It was no longer the small kitchen or the familiar dining table, but an open sky surrounded by nature. A gentle breeze carried the scent of earth and fresh greens, making everything feel lighter. James watched me for a moment, his steps slowing, and before he realized it, he joined in her simple, innocent games. James crouched down with knee to harvest vegetables, showing her how to pick cabbages that were just the right size. The two of them turned it into simple games, sometimes racing to see who could harvest faster, sometimes pretending to choose vegetables like market vendors. Laughter rang out continuously, blending into the peaceful rhythm of the fields. Nee laughed freely, without holding back, and James forgot his usual reserved manner, revealing a rare sense of ease. Diep stood a short distance away, quietly observing. She didn't join in right away, simply watching the father and daughter among the lush green rows. The pale winter sunlight fell gently over the scene, softening everything. Inside Diep, a warm feeling slowly spread. Nothing extraordinary was happening, no special moment was being marked, yet it was precisely this simplicity that made her realize so much. Amid the rustic landscape, the sound of Nee's laughter, and James's gentle presence, Diep felt the meaning of family more clearly than ever before. Not grand promises or elaborate plans, but simply being together, sharing the smallest moments. She stood there, letting the emotion rise naturally, just like the rhythm of life unfolding around her, slow, steady, and complete. Toward the end of the visit, as the sunlight gradually faded and no longer shone brightly over the vegetable fields, the three of them began to pack up their things. The afternoon breeze swept across the riverside fields, carrying a more noticeable chill, signaling that the day was coming to a close. James tied up the bags of vegetables they had just harvested, each bag not very large, but full, pleasantly heavy in his hands. Diep carefully rearranged their belongings, adjusted Nee's coat, while the little girl hugged her own bag of vegetables tightly, treating it like a small trophy after a joyful day. Before leaving, the three of them said goodbye to the local farmers. Simple greetings echoed through the quiet space, nothing elaborate, yet deeply sincere. The farmers responded with gentle smiles and a few warm, casual questions. Nee politely bowed her head in farewell, her face still glowing with excitement, her hands never letting go of the vegetable bag, as if afraid of losing something precious. The moment passed softly, leaving behind a sense of familiarity, as though they had just visited a place very close to the heart. The road home stretched out before them, long and quiet. The car moved slowly, with no sense of hurry. On both sides, patches of land, rows of trees, and familiar fields gradually slipped past. The cold wind crept through the gaps, brushing lightly against layers of clothing, enough to clearly feel the presence of winter. Yet the chill caused no discomfort, because inside the car was a very different atmosphere, warm and gentle. Nee leaned back in her seat, her legs swinging lightly, her eyes still shining with joy that had yet to fade. From time to time, she turned to excitedly recount her favorite moments of the trip, sometimes the big cabbages, sometimes the games she played with James among the vegetable rows. Her voice was clear and continuous, as if afraid that stopping would make the happiness slip away. James listened quietly, never interrupting, occasionally responding with a few short words, his voice low and warm, enough for Nee to know he was truly paying attention. Diep sat beside them, her hands holding the neatly placed bags of vegetables at her feet. Her gaze rested on the scenery slowly passing outside the window, yet her thoughts stayed close to the people beside her. She listened to Nee's laughter, to James's steady voice, and felt a sense of peace rise quietly within her. Without needing to say anything, she could clearly feel the connection filling the small space inside the car. This trip, after all, was not just about exploring a new business direction or learning more about farming. It unfolded gently, without pressure, without placing weight on results or profit. What remained after a long day was not only a few bags of vegetables brought home, but the feeling of being fully together, walking together, observing together, talking together, and sharing the smallest, most ordinary moments. There were no spoken promises, no grand commitments. That sense of connection came naturally, through glances, through short exchanges, through comfortable silences. It was the kind of warmth that settled quietly in the heart, even as the winter wind continued to blow outside. If you felt the warmth in this small story, please leave your loving comments for James and Diep's family. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying these simple yet deeply emotional, everyday stories in the upcoming videos.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Mình đang làm video. Bây giờ thì mình sẽ xuất và đăng video nhé mọi người. Video này thì chắc mình sẽ đăng vào sáng ngày mai. Tạm biệt mọi người, hẹn gặp lại.